Now we're going to look at the basic lesson plan. I'm going to show you all the different parts of a lesson. So if you look at this page, if you have your teacher's manual, it's bottom page maybe 24, 25, and these have all the different pieces of a lesson. Now you may not get through a whole lesson in a day. You may stop down here and then pick up from where you left the day before on the next day, or you may do 2 lessons in a day depending on your group or your student that you're working with. But we're going to go through each of these pieces. I'm going to give you an introduction to each one of them. Now for most students, this basic lesson plan will guide you in your daily work. For students who are having trouble with for the first lesson, the first couple lessons, there is a procedure called the modified lesson plan in your instructions to use for those students. If your students are really not getting it at all, you look for the section on pre-reading activities, which is also labeled phonemic awareness activities on the website, and you put the books away and you go do phonemic awareness activities orally, so they're learning how to blend and segment those phonemes, and then when they can do that, then you go back to the written words and to the books. With that first grade class, I did that for about 3 weeks. We just did oral phonemic awareness, and they could blend and segment 3 and 4 phoneme words, and when we went back to the book, they just took off like crazy, because that's what they needed. And on the other hand, if you have students that are reading at a high first grade level or higher than that, you go to the section on abbreviated lesson plans so you can go quickly through those first lessons that they may not need a lot of. Okay, so the first thing on there is the review of the previous day's homework. So if you as a classroom teacher send homework home, and it's mainly the yes and no questions, which I'm going to show you a little bit later, or if you as a tutor leave work to be done at home, then you need to instruct parents, do not help your child with this work, because you want them to do those yes-no questions by themselves so you can tell whether or not you have mastery in that lesson. This is one of the things that's going to tell you that. So if you do send home homework or leave homework, then probably that's going to be the first thing you do when you come in for the next days of instruction. If they get more than 1 or 2 wrong on these sheets, it may mean that you need to stay with that lesson longer. The next part is review of previous lessons. This is a completely natural part of the system. If you're on lesson 20 and you notice that your students are having trouble with words you taught in lesson 13, you just go back and do some review. It's perfectly okay to do that. These are the red words, and these are mostly non-phonetic words, which are the old Anglo-Saxon words which we use in every sentence that we speak practically. The and does and put and from and of, those very common words that you can't sound out. So we learn these by sight. And we introduce 1 or 2 of these usually in each lesson, and then we go over them again and again. But the way that we teach this is we use the multisensory method called skywriting or table writing. So what I'll do is I'll go T-H-E spells the, and the students will do that with me. T-H-E spells the. For older students, you can have them do that on the table. T-H-E spells the, T-H-E spells the. So we want our students to learn these to 100% mastery, to complete automaticity. So we teach them, you know, with the skywriting or the table writing, but you go over them enough times so that they have them down perfect, because you don't want them missing these small words when they're reading sentences. These are important, and they are difficult to sound out, so we learn them by sight. L-I-K-E says like. L-I-K-E spells like. Now we're going to look at the phoneme letter cards, and phonemes are the sounds that letters spell. And we teach these with that same multisensory skywriting or table writing that we use for red words. And one reason we do that is because if you teach in a multisensory fashion, then you don't have to worry if this kid is weak visually or weak auditory or weak kinesthetically, because you're using all the senses. So what we do to teach these is we will go C, cat, k, C, cat, k, C, cat, k. And with your older students, you can do that on the table. C, cat, k, C, cat, k. Okay, and then we have a vowel here. This is A, and for this we do A, apple, A. A, apple, A. And you can also do that on the table, of course, A, apple, A. But you can also stretch out that sound, so you can go A, apple, A, to kind of emphasize that and help them get that sound. Now, The short E is one that some students have trouble with. So we're doing E, Eddie, eh. And this boy's name is Eddie. E, Eddie, eh. And again, we can stretch that out. E, Eddie, eh. Now, first we're doing the whole thing. We're doing E, Eddie, eh. And then they're just saying E, Eddie, eh as they become more and more automatic. Then they're just saying E, eh. And then after a while, you're going for automaticity, so you just want them to say eh. You want them to have these sounds down automatically. So then when they look at a word and they're trying to sound out a word, they don't have to try and remember what the sounds are. They have the sounds right there in their head. And the work can be putting those sounds together, because if they have to try to remember and blend them together, that's an impossible situation. So we teach these to automaticity. And of course, it's important that you say these sounds correctly and that you teach these sounds correctly to your students. Say it with me. A, Y, play, A. A, Y, play, A. E, E, feed, E. E, E, feed, E. Now you have these on cards, and you also have them on your posters, which are either up on your wall if you're in a classroom teacher, or there are smaller versions that you can put on your desk if you're a tutor. So what you're going to do is you're going to uncover these as you cover these lessons. For each lesson, you're going to uncover the letters on these sheets. And the second one is most of the blends, beginning and ending blends, and again, you're going to uncover those as you go. So your students can look up on the wall or if it's on the table, look at the table, and remember exactly what you've taught before that. Then we have some vowel spellings. We have our magic E's here, I, G, H, Y, and some different spellings here on this sheet, which again, you're going to uncover as you go. Then we have two vowel team charts. This is the first one. Vowel teams are two vowels in a row that make a certain sound. And here is the second sheet here. And now, if you have students who understand percentages, probably third grade and up, we have another copy of those three sheets which have percentages on them. And what this means is O consonant E spells O 81% of the time. Okay, now that's useful information. IGH spells I almost all the time. So these percentages can help them make better guesses for letters and their sounds. And here is the first vowel team page. Now we see here EE spells E 99% of the time. Now the one exception is the word bin, B-E-E-N. But remember those kids I talked about who intuit the internal structure of the language? Those kids, by their reading, figure this out. They know when they see a word and it has EE in it and it's not bin, that's going to say E. They know that, but we teach it to our students. EA spells E 63% of the time. Now a little bit later in the program, EA spells E 26% of the time. So E is your first guess, E is your second guess. Then we have three sight words, break, stake, and great. And those are the three that sound like A, and we teach those as sight words. But you see how this makes students be able to make better guesses when they see vowels and vowel combinations. And at the end of this tape, we will go through all those sounds so that you can carefully listen to those sounds and say them correctly. Now the next things are the spell it cards. So in Orton-Gillingham, we always go both ways, from reading to spelling to reading. So we've just taught A, apple, A. I turn to a student and I go, say A, and then I say, spell A. And the student goes, A spells A. I'll turn to a student and I'll say T. Spell T. Answer is T spells T. Now after lesson 11, if I say to a student, I want you to tell me 3 ways to spell K, because we've learned 3 ways, the student will say C, K, and CK, because we've learned 3 things that spell K at that point. After lesson, and the long vowels too, they build up. So after lesson 55, I'll ask a student, give me 5 ways to spell O. O consonant E, OA, OE, O at the end of an open syllable, and OW. So there's 5 major ways to spell O. But he doesn't have to remember all those in his head because they're up there on the wall, on the posters. They've been uncovered, so he can refer up there to them. And this is a very important piece of the program, and also this is another time when it's very important to say those sounds correctly because you're asking them to identify the letters that spell those sounds. Say a.
A.
Spell a.
A spells a.
Say sh.
Sh.
Spell sh.
SH spells sh.
Say ch.
Ch.
Spell ch.
CH spells ch.
The next thing is the phonics ball game, and I use this a lot with any age student for at least the first 10 lessons, sometimes the first 20 lessons. And what we're doing is we're trying to build automaticity with those letters and sounds. So I will throw the ball to a student and I'll say M. The student will throw the ball back and say I'll throw it to a student, I'll say L, they'll throw it back and say O. I'll throw it, I'll say A, they'll throw it back and say A. Then I'll go the opposite way. I'll throw the ball and I'll say T. They'll throw it back and say T. I'll throw the ball and say A, they'll throw it back and say O. So this is a really fun procedure. These foam balls are nice because they can't knock anything over, and if you can get the bigger ones, they're even better because little children can handle them very easily. So the next part is the introduction of new material. Now when you get to a new lesson, realize everything here is numbered. There's lesson numbers on the red cards, on the spell it cards, on the phoneme cards, on the posters. Everything you could pull together for a new lesson, you will be able to tell from all the different numbers on the cards. And now I want to talk about syllable division and syllable typing. And this is real important because it really helps students learn to read bigger words. And what we have here is we have 6 syllable division rules, and we have the numbers where we introduce them, and I'll show you how we do that. So we're dividing words by specific kind of rules, and then we are labeling the syllables in specific ways, so we know what kind of syllable each is when we divide a word up into 2 syllables. So the reason we do this is because in English, vowels are a real problem. Consonants are pretty well behaved, but vowels do all kinds of weird things. But if you can take a word and divide it into syllables, and you can label that syllable as being a certain type of syllable, like an R-controlled or open or closed syllable, you have a much better chance of figuring out what that vowel spells and a much better chance of reading that word. So that's why we do syllable division. And if you haven't done this before, it's not going to be hard for you. There's about 30 worksheets, 35 worksheets, and you will learn it right along with your students. So here again are the syllable division rules and the syllable types. They're also in smaller format. Here's one of the first syllable division pages where they only have one type of syllable here, so they don't label it, but the first syllable rule is divide between 2 consonants that are between 2 vowels. And they divide them, and then they read them, and they put these little swoopy lines underneath them here to divide the words in 2. Now here's one a little further along where there's 3 kinds of syllables, but only 1 kind of syllable division still. Here's one a little further where they have 5 different kinds of syllables and 2 syllable division rules. Here's one that has 4 different kinds of dividing rules and all 6 syllable types. And here's one that has 5 types of syllable division rules and all 6 syllable types. So you're going to build on this. You will learn this as you go. If you're in Gillingham trained, you're going to know this is pretty standard, but otherwise you will learn it as you go along. And as you see, we divide most words with these little swoopy lines. And what we have here is a bunch of these little mustache dealy things, which we cut out, and we put those under words in the text in order to divide words in the text without having to draw lines in there. So this is a really good procedure because it breaks words into smaller chunks and it makes those chunks easier to read. So the next thing I want to talk about is word reading. Now, what we did with word reading is we put the words on pages like this. Now, most Orton Gillingham programs use a lot of flashcards, and I still use some flashcards, but I got real tired of having 7,000 flashcards in my room. So I wanted to try see if I could find a different way to present the words, that would help students not visually confuse words, which is why we do them on flashcards. So I put the words surrounded by a white space and surrounded by a black box with a number in it. And sure enough, this works very well. They do not transpose letters and sounds beyond, up through these lines. So this worked very well. So this is the format that we developed in this program for word reading. Now, so as you can see, this is one of the first lessons. This is lesson 1. The other advantage of this is you can kind of compare words together. I mean, mad and mat, there's only one letter difference there. Okay, mat and at, there's an added letter here. So you can kind of do some comparisons in there, which is another thing that's very useful. And also with the pages with 2-syllable words, especially after a new kind of syllable division, you can use these little mustache-looking things. The students use these to help them divide the words that makes it easier for them to read those words. So that's how we use those things. And when we teach students how to sound out words, we use the finger tapping technique, which is from Barbara Wilson of the Wilson Reading System. It's a very strong phonemic awareness training technique, as well as being multisensory, involving all these senses. So what the student does is they tap their fingers to their thumb as they say the various sounds that are in the word. And they go from left to right. I'm going to go from the camera angle left to right, but I teach it left to right at first. After they know it, if it's working well, I don't care if they're going up or down or backwards, but if it's working, it doesn't matter. So anyway, a word like man would be man, man. So they say it faster and faster until they get that word. And you'll have to teach this, you'll have to model it, but it's a really powerful technique. A word like flat would be flat, flat, flat. A word like sleep would be sleep, 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 okay? Words with more sounds in them, like blast, would be blast, blast, blast. So you see how that works. It helps them blend those sounds together. And it's a real powerful technique. And it's also useful for older students because they can do this if they happen to be in the library or somewhere else. They can do this with their hand in their pocket or their hand behind their back. But it is a very, very powerful way to help students blend those sounds together. And we use this with all ages, from little children who can move their fingers like this to older students too. This is such a powerful technique. We use it with everybody.
Eel, 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 steel.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Very good. Another thing about reading words is if a student is trying to read a phonetic word from the word list, one that can be sounded out, and he's having trouble, and I tell him what the word is, well, we've just wasted our time. He hasn't learned anything. You know, we just wasted a few minutes. So I never tell a student what the word is, but I will help them sound it out. Like if the word's man, I might go man, or I may go man, and I'll give him hints so he at least gets a part of that work. He at least does a part of the sounding out. And then maybe later on he does a little more of the sounding out, and a little more. So every time he sounds out that word or a word like that, he learns something additional. So I may also say, well, what do you hear at the beginning of that word, or what do you hear at the end of the word, or what sound does OW spell? To give them those kind of hints, it's going to help. Now, part of this is that I may have to help Johnny for a minute and a half sound out a word, which is one of the reasons we work in small groups, because if there's 5 kids waiting, that's one thing. If there's 30 kids waiting, that's a whole nother problem. But Johnny needs that 1.5 minutes for me to help him work with that. And then the same thing is true when we read sentences. I may have to help a student read a sentence for 2 or 3 minutes. And that's real valuable time for that student. But again, if you've got a lot of kids waiting, it's going to be hard to do that. Also, and then we'll go on to sentence reading here. And sentences in the book are on pages like this. And we've also done this again to try to avoid visual confusion that sometimes beginning or struggling readers have. So we put these dark lines in between the sentences. And this works really well to isolate them. Students do not transpose letters and sounds through these lines here. So, of course, when we read sentences, we're going to use the finger tapping technique. We're going to use the swoopy tools for the two-syllable words. And also, a lot of times, and of course, we're going to be joking around with some of the text, but also a lot of times I will ask a student to read a sentence a second time. First time they sound it out, then I ask them to read it faster because I want to work on that fluency. I don't do it all the time, but I do it a lot, so that they learn. They sound out a sentence, then they read it faster afterwards. It's one of those things that helps with fluency. And then I also want to ask questions about vocabulary and comprehension and make sure they understand the sentences. Now these sentences, which are in these bigger boxes here, which are in almost every lesson, is a lot of times where the silliness is and the play acting stuff comes from. Give me some dirt, I'll give somebody some dirt that day. I am a girl. It's pretty funny if you're a boy reading that. And there's various other things on here. What's up? What up? Chirp for me, twirl for me. So it's very action-oriented things you can do, and this is one of the earlier lessons. So let me talk for a few minutes about fluency. There's a lot of fluency ideas in the text, and a lot of things that you can try with fluency drills. There's a lot we're learning about fluency right now, and so a lot of research is being done in that realm, so there will be more information about that coming. But let me show you a real simple fluency drill that you can do with a student. So here is from Chapter 8. Here are some sentences from Chapter 8. And what I've done down here is I've run this off, which you have permission to do for fluency drills, and I put the number of words here. So you bring a student up, you have them read for 1 minute, or if it's a young student, you might want to read for 2 minutes. And then you tell them, you know, you got this many words right, and you missed this word, and you read fat for fed, and tell him the mistakes that he's made. And you send him back to his desk and ask him to read it twice by himself. Then you have him come back again, and you have him read for another minute. Then you talk again about how many words he read and where the mistakes were and where he needs to look more carefully. Send him back to his desk one more time, have him read twice by himself again, and come up for the third time and read for 1 more minute. And then you look at how far he's gotten then at that point. And you see growth. You can usually see a lot of growth from the first reading to the second reading to the third reading. And if you want to, you can chart this and make this a regular part of your program. But you can also do this with other books. It's just that you know from this, after you've been there, you know that your student can read 90 and 95% of those words, and that's what you need to do fluency drills in the first place. But if your student, say, reads 30 words a minute on the first reading and 29 on the second reading and 31 on the third reading, good chance that's a student that needs fluency drills. And we're still trying to find out which kids really need fluency drills and which don't. Because I'm starting to practice these fluency drills with younger students to see, because a lot of students that I've taught reading and taught automatic word recognition have not needed fluency drills. But some students absolutely need fluency drills. Okay, now we're going to talk about block spelling and sound spelling. And these are both very powerful phonemic awareness training techniques as well as powerful phonics techniques. They're multisensory, and they really help students understand that underlying structure of words, or the underlying sound structure of words. They're especially important for beginning readers of any age. Now, what I use for block spelling is these little plastic blocks, and if you're working with older students, you might want to use something else, pennies and nickels or whatever, but this is any kind of manipulative that you keep using the same thing for the same. So this I use for a consonant sound block, my blues, and for yellows, I use that for the vowel sound block. So in lesson 1, the students have read the word mad, and they've read the word mad in some sentences, and then I give them these blocks and I say, spell the word mad for me. And the student puts the blocks in order like this, hopefully. And what I say is, give me the sounds of the word from left to right. I'm going to go from the camera angle left to right. Student will go d. Now give me the letters from left to right. M, A, D. Now, if that student can't remember what this sound is, they can stretch it out and go apple. That's what it is, A. Remember that keyword. If they go money, that's M. Okay, and also when you're doing this with them, you can help them stretch this out too. So you can go ad. so that they can more clearly hear those sounds. At first, if a student's struggling, that's one thing you're going to want to do. Now, these blocks stand for sounds rather than necessarily for single letters. So the word teach would be spelled the same way. T-each, T-E-A-C-H. Now, when we do magic E words, we have this little cutout that we place here because the magic E doesn't make a sound, so we don't give it a block. So this would be the word take, T-A-K, T-A-K-E. The word flat would look like this, F-O-at, F-L-A-T.
S-U-I-P.
Good.
S-L-I-P spells slip.
Very good. Wishbone.
Wishbone.
And what goes on the end?
Magic.
Okay, now would you show us with this hand, please? Go ahead.
W-I-S-H-B-O.
Spell it.
W-I.
Wishbone.
S-H-B-O-N, magic E.
Now, as we go on in the lessons, we do block spelling and sound spelling with longer and longer words. So I'm going to show you one of the longer words that we get to a little bit later on in the program. This is the word fantastic. F-A-N-T-A-S-T-I-C. F-A-N-T-A-S-T-I-C. So look what we're doing here. Well, we're training the structure of words, obviously, in a very concrete way. You can't get more concrete than this. So we're training the structure of language, the sound structure of language. We're doing left-right tracking, which is beneficial for a lot of students. We're doing phoneme segmentation, which is the best predictor of early reading success according to research and can be taught, and we're teaching it here. We're doing phoneme identification, which is spelling, and we're doing short-term sequential linguistic memory, which is necessary for reading and spelling. And what short-term linguistic memory is the ability to hold a bunch of linguistic elements in your head in a specific order, which is what you need to take a bunch of sounds and stick them together to read, or take sounds apart in order to spell. And a lot of our students have trouble with that particular skill. So now I'm going to look at sound spelling. And sound spelling is also a very powerful phonemic awareness. It's multisensory. It teaches the structure of words. I, at this point, use block spelling and sound spelling about the same, about 50-50. So a lot of times I'll do maybe block spelling for this lesson and sound spelling for the next, and alternate, or sometimes if it's a long lesson, I'll go back and forth within that lesson. So what we do here is the student will write a word and say the sounds that the letter spells as he writes the word. So the word cat would be k, a, t. The word sleep would be s, o, e, p. Okay? The word glad would be g, o, a, d. The word sunset would be s, n, s, e, t. The word mad would be m, a, d. Now there's some kind of fun we can do with this, which is also very educational. Here's the word mad, and I'll ask a student, okay, change it to the word had. And there we have had. There's had, change it to hat. And there's hat. There's hat, change it to hot. And there's hot. There's hot, change it to hit. And there's hit. So that's also a very beneficial thing to do also. And I do it on this whiteboard, which I pass around to the various students, and they like writing on this thing. Creep. Heap. Good. And spell sheet. Good. block spelling and sound spelling impact reading at least as much as they impact spelling. When my students are having trouble reading a set of words, I do more block spelling and more sound spelling, and they read them better. Also, my students seem to enjoy doing both of these activities. So both of these techniques are very powerful techniques for teaching that structure of language and the structure of words, which students need to be able to read and spell. Now, I want to talk to you for a couple minutes about what's been referred to as the spelling voice. Now, very good spellers can see words in their head. A lot of our students cannot do that. So we use the spelling voice to try to compensate for that. Myself, the only reason I can spell the word Wednesday is because in my head I think Wednesday. The reason I can spell basket is because somewhere in my head I hear basket. So what we do with students, and we do these mostly with schwas, sometimes with silent letters, but there are 4 schwa lessons in here, and schwas are those letters that don't say either long or short sounds, but to say a different kind of sound. We use the spelling voice. So what I'll say to a student is, I want you to spell the word magnet, but it's spelled magnet. Okay? And then I can give it to him for block spelling or sound spelling or written spelling or oral spelling. But if he can remember magnet along with magnet, he can spell that word. So we're doing that more and more. It is a very beneficial technique, and it is helping our students spell those irregular words. A few things I don't have time to review on this tape. We have an individualized spelling program. In this program, we have a long vowel spelling frequency program, and we have about 10 really good spelling rules that we teach. So I want to talk for a few minutes about charades and other games. And these are optional, but there are some games in here which it suggests that are really important. Now, when I do charades with my students, I just bring a student up, point to a word in a lesson we've just done, student acts it out, and the rest of the kids guess. Now, you may not be in a situation where you can do that, but one thing you can do if you have to keep your students a little quieter is have students pick a sentence in a lesson and draw a picture about it and have the other kids guess. So that's one way you can do that. And there are a lot of other suggestions for games and activities in here. There are a couple good fluency flashcard activities for you to make. And there's also the one that I like and the kids like also is syllable concentration. In syllable concentration, you take a 2-syllable word, you write 1 syllable on one card and 1 syllable on the other card, and you do a bunch of those, and you turn them over and you play concentration. Students like it, and at the same time, it's very educational. And you could also do that in a tutoring situation, because you and the student could be playing each other, and that works very well also. Now let me talk about homework. About every 6 lessons, there is a drawing homework page. And the students can read all these words by this lesson. So they just read what it says on the line, the roach ate the green slime, and they draw a picture of it, okay? Now, this is totally optional for older students, but younger students love this stuff, and they're always going to want to draw it. So it's definitely there for younger students. Now, again, you can do this in class, or you can send it home. Now, the next part of homework, which is really the important part of homework, are the yes and no questions. We talked about this a little bit before. What they're doing in here is they're taking the words they learned in that lesson and they're answering these yes and no questions. Now, if you decide to, as a tutor, leave this for homework, as a classroom teacher, send it home for homework, it needs to be done without parents' help. And if you do it in the classroom, you need to do it without you helping them, because this is one of the ways you're going to tell whether or not you've mastered that lesson. This is one of the primary ways you're going to tell that. Also, students like these. I get reports from parents that the kids were sitting in the corner giggling and doing these pages. I had a teacher once that told me her kids got mad every time they didn't get their yes and no homework that day. But they need to do them independently so that you can tell if they actually are doing okay with that lesson. Here's one a little bit further along the line. Also, in the elementary mid-school programs, you have sheets for each lesson with all the words you've just taught. And on the bottom it says, please sign your name after your child has read these words to you. So you can send this home and have the student read the words that they just learned to mom or dad. And you could leave it also if you're a tutor, same thing. And usually they can read these words pretty well by the end of the lesson, so they're kind of proud to read this anyway, but they can read it to mom or dad or grandpa or older sibling. I one year worked in a school where almost nobody returned homework. And I got 75% homework returned with this because it's simple, it's the same thing, you don't have to figure anything out. All you do is have the kid read the words to you, the student read the words to you, and then sign your name. So that can be very useful for elementary and mid-school kids. I recently put in about 45 of these Mad Lib type of sheets. And what they can, this is basically after lesson 11. After lesson 11, they can read all these words, and you talk about nouns, what a noun is, and they just fill in a noun in each one. And they can do silly stuff. I tell them if they make me laugh, they get extra credit. So we have a bunch of the noun sheets from different lessons, a bunch of sheets where they fill in verbs, another bunch of sheets where they fill in adjectives, and then a few sheets that deal with some of these hard words like there, and there. That's another one of the difficult one for some students.